All right. We're live. Elan, thank you so much for doing this first live recording with me. I am super excited about it.
Yeah, man, me too. We've known each other for almost 20 years now, so it's fun to push record on one of these conversations.
Yeah, and a special shout out to the folks here at 28th and Park for letting us use this beautiful recording studio. I am delighted to have found a partner that is interested in supporting what I'm doing and IRL. And Elan, there's no better person I could think of to kind of initiate this new chapter of my podcasting journey with. So
yeah, really excited and beautiful space. Yeah, this is gonna be fun.
So you know, when I think about you, I think of someone who has just like leaned into storytelling, leaned into the way that people can present themselves and stand out from noise. Like really, when I talk to people these days and they're like, hey, like we're launching this new thing or we're excited about what we're working on. It's competitive, it's crowded, everyone's building, you know, there's so much, like anyone can build these days. And so like, do you know anyone who can help us stand out? And I always send them to you.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how many of them end up working with you, but hopefully some amount. And the reason for that is I think you've just like, you've been like kind of relentless about staying away from cliches and staying away from, I don't know, like meh average kind of positioning. Every time I look at what you're doing, I'm like, there's like something really, like I can see you in it. So where I want to start the conversation is, what do you think is making this moment so critical for people to be thinking about their brand, thinking about the way they present themselves, and how has it maybe changed how you think about telling your story right now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for the kind words. I think the biggest thing is it's, as you just mentioned, and I think all of us are experiencing, within the last year, it's never been easier to build and ship something with all the amazing advancements that are happening in AI and technology as a whole. But as everybody and their brother is shipping something, it's never been harder to get people to care. It's never been harder to break through the algorithm. And I think people are really feeling that in a way that they never have before. I think in this old world of tech, like you had a really great product, you had a clever go-to-market, you're off to the races, and there's a standard playbook for how to be able to grow and really be famous for something. And I think what a lot of folks are realizing now is you can have an insight, you can build a really great product, but if it works, 10 other people are going to be copying you within the next month, right? So it's how do you stand out? How do you get people to refer you via word of mouth? And I think so much of that comes from the power of storytelling. And I think it's really starting with why should anybody care about what we're doing? And if you can really craft that story into an ownable point of view, I think the brands that we're seeing really lead the charge today. It's not just that they have a beautiful website or a really great logo or even a really great headline on their website. They have an ownable point of view that whenever you see anything that they put out, you feel, you know, why they're doing what they're doing, and you want to be able to come along for the ride.
Yeah, I think about some of the products that like make me feel something. It's not always like, I mean, each of them making me feel something different, but you know, I will say like it's kind of hard for a product to make me feel something just from their marketing. It's got to be like the product experience itself has to have like an opinionated stance on like the actual workflow that they're helping with, and then telling that story externally. That's like, it's so hard to stand out. You know, I'm curious if you can think of a company that's in a very crowded space and where there's a lot of competitors and other products, but you think that they've maybe done a really good job of like standing out through what they make people feel, or like they're, you know, like what comes to mind?
Yeah, really great question. It's something that I think about a lot. So I think the one brand that's top of mind right now that anybody who's paying attention to AI is what Anthropic is doing with Claude, right? And I don't know, 6 months ago they did a pop-up here in New York City, and people were waiting in line for hours. It was wrapped around the block, I don't know, 2-3 blocks to be able to get in. Yeah, it was almost like a fashion pop-up, right? And you've never seen it, or at least I've never seen anything like that happen in tech. And maybe a few weeks before that, they launched their Keep Thinking campaign, which was basically around this idea that, humans are in charge of creativity, that humans are the ones who are solving problems, that they really position their AI as a way to be able to accelerate that and empower you versus replacing that for you. And they really did it in a very tasteful way, which was really quote unquote anti-slop, which is, I think, a lot of what people are sharing and complaining about online today. So I think between that initial campaign, I think around that pop-up here in New York City, and then I think with their Super Bowl commercials, right, really juxtaposing them against other competitors like OpenAI, who just announced that there's going to be ads within their product. I think what you're seeing is a very closely commoditized product, right? Like every few months, another one of these frontier labs has better benchmarks, but for the most part, they do the.
So I was talking to some of my friends about those ads, and I think and these are mostly kind of like product leaders who are in like the creator space, and I think the consensus in the group was like it felt like those ads were less trying to appeal to the individual consumer of generative AI products and why they should use Claude instead of ChatGPT, and more appealing to the talent. And given how competitive it is to attract like really good talent, that if you could get even one like senior AI researcher to like want to go work for Claude for Anthropic instead of OpenAI because of that ad, that would be the ROI that ad would pay for itself. The whole ad campaign, honestly, maybe. So do you think that like when you were watching those ads, do you think that as someone who's like a professional branding kind of like expert, do you kind of like see through the matrix for what they're trying to do? Do you agree that there's like potentially like an order of like a hierarchy of value for what they're hoping to achieve with that campaign that's like maybe like talent above? They're not going to change like your suburban Texas, grocery shopper to go use Claude because Claude doesn't do ads, right? Like it's probably not that.
Well, I think you bring up a bunch of really good points, right? So I think part of what made that ad so special is it linked back to their positioning of like, we're not going to interrupt you with ads, that we're all about helping you think more and think better, right? So I think the way it connected the dots, so their whole brand system worked in unison, was really, really smart. But I think you bring up a really great point that is under-discussed. I think when anybody comes to me for a redesign or for a rebrand, right, my first question is why, right? Like, what are we trying to achieve? I think the way rebrands go wrong and why a lot of design and branding firms have such a bad reputation is you spend all of this time, you spend all of this money, and then like you have a visual makeover, it looks cool, but does it actually move anything forward? And it's impossible to be able to measure. But I think one of the amazing under-discussed things of rebranding your company is it can be for growth and public perception, but it could be to attract the best talent in the world. It could be to align your company around who you are and what you believe. There's all sorts of different ways for rebrands to be successful. So the fact that I think you brought that up, I think the talent wars is like the number one thing keeping CEOs up at night right now, right? If these big frontier labs are throwing these huge multi-million-dollar pay packages towards them, so much of what you have to do is you have to tell a compelling story of who are we, what do we believe, what is our vision, how are we different from other folks, and folks who believe what you're going to believe are going to come and join your team. Also, some folks might say this is not for me at all. I don't want to be a part of this.
And that's like successful positioning. Obviously, it's designed to resonate with your target audience, but like, do you also think successful positioning inherently, in order to resonate with your target audience, has to, like, almost like by definition, repel the people that are not your audience?
1,000,000%, right? Otherwise, I think you kind of fade into irrelevance. And I think there's a specific way of being able to execute on that depending on what you're doing. I don't necessarily know if it makes sense for every single brand to be extremely provocative and combative. But one of the questions that I ask in my process all the time, right, is if our brand were to have an enemy, right, something we stand against in the world or popular culture, or maybe even a literal enemy, right, a competitor, who would that be and why, right? And I think what it does is it forces people to take a stance on something, right? If you're not taking a stance, if you're not opinionated on anything, again, it comes down to one question. Why should anybody care, right? If you can't answer that question with conviction, you're not going to be able to grow. Nobody's going to be motivated to share what you're doing with anybody else. So I think, great positioning really does take a stance. But again, it's not necessarily from a mainstream perspective. It can be extremely niche, right? I think if some folks don't understand your positioning, but your 100,000 true fans do, then it's a successful story.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's my reaction when I was watching those Claude ads was, I think you guys are serving different audiences. Like, I think, like, as far as the product goes, like, Claude is, I mainly think of it as a work product. I know ChatGPT has like an enterprise offering, but when I talk to people that are very serious about like using AI for work, it's like, sure, Codex for like coding and stuff is super good, but like Claude Code and Claude, I think, stand out as like the main thing people want to use at work. And then if you think about I think Sam Altman's response to those ads mentioned that there are more ChatGPT users in Texas than there are Claude users in the US.
Burn.
Right? And so it's like, given how expensive it is to serve the demand, to just like get enough compute, like serve enough tokens to let people like do the things that they want to do with these products, like you kind of have to have an ad model, right? So it's like taking a stab at OpenAI for doing almost like the thing they have to do to maintain their position as kind of the mass market winners by counter positioning yourself as like, and we're not going to play that game, we're playing a different game. I just thought was really interesting. But yeah, go ahead.
I think exactly what you said there, depending on what game you're playing. And I think like this is part of the work that I love to do, is working with teams to be able to figure out what game are you actually playing. To your point, OpenAI is the category leader. So many more people know about them, right? What they're trying to do from a brand strategy perspective is very different to what Anthropic is trying to do with Claude, who is challenging the category, who by necessity needs to be a little bit more provocative, who needs to be a little bit more niche. And I think what they've been able to do is Claude has been able to attract the enterprise. I think they've been able to attract the anti-slop crowd. I think the more tasteful crowd, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe not more tasteful crowd, right? But I think they have a more tasteful point of view around what they kind of put out from a marketing perspective.
I mean, it's certainly more of a status like thing to say you use Claude than to use ChatGPT, right? Like they've kind of
sure,
yeah.
And I think it's because they're playing different games, right? So this is where I think having a point of view really it matters at key inflection points, right? When you're going to market, a point of view really matters for how are you going to break through the noise, right? If you're defining a new category, if you have a new CEO or you're pivoting your company or you're announcing a new product, right? Your point of view is going to really help drive what that new era is going to be. If you're challenging a category or creating a new category, right? That point of view is going to be everything to be able to point the ship in the right direction. I think what you're seeing with so many companies now is if you're creating a new category, it requires a ton of education to help people understand where this new crazy toy fits within their life.
So, okay, what's coming to mind for me is like, and I'm as guilty of it as anyone. And you recently gave me some really helpful feedback for Insider Loops. But like when I was working on our positioning page for that, or my Copilot, or like my course, like a lot of the things I've been working on these days have kind of like an element of the function. Like, what's the function of it? What is the thing, right? And almost like as a subset of that, I'm like, I want to describe who it's for or when it's for, right? Like the double click into it. But I don't think I have leaned into being, I like the term that sounds like you're maybe moving away from it, but unignorable. Yeah. Like I think like the spicy opinionated, what do I believe about the world that no one else believes, or who is the enemy of what I'm doing? Like I have not internalized those things. And so my question for you is, are do a lot, like, am I kind of like in the majority of the way that people generally start to think? And then what do you find clicks for people that kind of gets them to change? You know, like what's the emotional buy-in that someone like me has to reach in order to like literally go and change my website to be like, I'm going to be like
Totally
more opinionated now?
Totally. So I think you bring up a really good point that I think so many companies, and really Silicon Valley in general, is really good at product marketing, right? I think we have the frameworks, we have the examples of what works. We're building this feature because it solves this problem. And I think all of that is great. There are basically reasons to exist in the world because they solve this functional problem. And without solving a functional problem, you don't have a business, you don't have a product that works. All of that stuff is really important. I think where the big opportunity is where I try and work with startups and my clients is figuring out that holy shit emotional insight, right? And I think it starts with how you frame what you're doing. I think a lot of companies frame what they're doing around the business problem. And it's like, how do I solve the business problem to be able to create growth? But really the way I like to think about these things is what is the human problem behind the business problem, right? Because if we don't really identify the human problem behind the business problem, nobody's going to pay attention. Nobody's going to be able to
when you
care.
say the human problem behind the business problem, do you mean like I'm imagining, let's just say like broad strokes, there's B2B companies and B2C companies. So when you say like the human problem behind the business problem, do you mean like if we're talking about like a B2C company, like is that the human problem experienced by their users that underlies their quote unquote business problem for why they're coming to you to solve it?
Yes, and I think it applies just as much to B2B, right? Because at the end of the day, people are buying behind these businesses, right? So it's always, right, if like I'm selling software to a head of product, right? It's like, what do I understand about them that nobody else has been able to identify, right? What are they thinking? What are they feeling? And what are they experiencing that they haven't said out loud yet? And I think it's identifying that insight, right? This unspoken truth that helps you see the problem a little bit differently. And I think the beauty of going through a process like this is I think for a lot of founders and a lot of really early heads of marketing or heads of design, they spent so much time thinking about the functional because of how important it is. But then it's like, okay, how do you kind of look at this through a new angle, through that emotional lens? And if you can identify that emotional lens and you can have that connect the dots with what your product does that's better than anybody else, you have this whole new way of seeing your brand and why anybody should care and what those hooks are, which then opens up new creative possibilities that you've never thought of. But that still makes sense, right? I think that's what you're trying to do from a creative perspective is you want to be authentic and genuine, but you want to do it in a really unexpected way. And the way in is through that emotional insight that you just mentioned.
Got it. Yeah. So I want to come back to insider loops in a second, but I just as you were talking, I was thinking about granola as an example of. I wasn't planning to talk about granola, but they came to mind because they came into the picture at a moment when it felt like so many meeting recording products that take notes for you, and I was personally just like Fathom and Read and like read all these like different products, and I was like just getting tired of the category, right? And then granola comes out and it's like functionally, you know, there's like selling points about it. But as you use granola, by the way, this is not sponsored by granola.
But it could be. So
could be.
if you work at granola, reach out to Ben.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if they want to sponsor the podcast at some point. But because Mark and I don't want to take, like, that's an opinionated thing that we believe is like we don't want to take on a sponsor for the podcast who is not building something that we ourselves love using. That's just like part of our vibe. So granola is on the short list of companies that I think we would love to have as sponsors. But my point is, like, by the way, I hate their latest rebrand. So like I'm opinionated about that too, right? Like there's no shade on granola as a product. I love the product. And actually the more I love the product, the more it pisses me off if they shoot themselves in the foot with things that feel like maybe they're seeing the Matrix, like they're playing 4D chess and I'm not seeing it, but like we can talk about the rebrand in a moment. But like the thing that I thought was so special about the feeling of using granola is it's like a peace of mind in a way that I had never experienced with a note taker. like actually most note takers would make me feel a little anxious because they're like joining the call as a recorder. It's almost like if you and I had like a robot standing here that was like taking notes, like that feels interruptive.
Sure.
Whereas if you can just have a conversation and we just know that it's transcribing in the background silently, and you don't have to worry about taking notes, and it's just going to be available to you later. That started creating a peace of mind for me, and I think that peace of mind is why I started like telling people about Granola, not the functionality. Yeah. It was the feeling of like you just don't worry about it, right?
And what about the rebrand didn't land for you?
Okay. There's a few layers to this. So the first thing is because I had the emotional reaction, as I mentioned to you, from using Granola for over a year, and it's kind of like white, clean interface where I knew where things existed and I knew where to find the things I wanted to find, and I recognized the icon, and it was like very clean with like 2 different shades of green. I'm pretty sure, like a kind of like a darker green and like a lighter green. Like I felt a certain way about the brand, and I had been telling everyone about it. I'm like, okay, so and I know that there's like, when you're a VC backed company, you have to start to think about, you can't get complacent. You can't feel like, okay, just because what got us here won't get us there, is like always kind of like the trope. So they probably internally had to start thinking about like ways to differentiate more, pave a path to like the new thing. I watched the 20-minute unveiling between the 2 co-founders talking about why they did the rebrand, and I had so many kind of like, you know, I had so many flashbacks to conversations I've had over the years with my marketing partners, design partners, about all the things we can't do because like the current brand is just like not, you know, like we just can't flex the brand to like do the thing. So like I understand the pressures that could pull them into a direction of doing a rebrand. Like I get why people do rebrands. So it's not about the fact that they did a rebrand. It's kind of just like literally the result. The result of it's kind of like a gross green. There's a spiral, which kind of plays right into the meme of all the AI products looking like buttholes, like all the logos. So it just didn't feel like original in that sense. It has a nod to the G because like that's like a G-shaped spiral. But it felt kind of like a step backwards to me. It felt like they went from like a premium, clean thing that I was like excited to use because it got out of the way and gave me peace of mind, to this thing that looks a little bit more like the user interface looks a little bit more like Claude now, and like the color scheme and the structure in the UI, and then also like the actual color of the logo feels kind of like a lot of people, you know, reacted with like vomit reactions because it's like kind of like vomit greenish. I just don't. So, and then in the unveiling video, they said that they believe this is something they do every 5 years. So I'm like, okay, so you guys went through this whole effort. You probably hired a super expensive agency. Probably spent over $1 million on that. Like, is like people that I know I mean, I don't know if you disagree, but this kind of major rebrand, I suspect, is probably like at least $1 million. And I don't think it's made a single, like I don't think I've reaped any of the positive benefits as a user from it, and I don't think I feel better about it.
As an early adopter who really loved and evangelized the product, and I think that's totally fair. And I think people fall into this tendency to look at rebrands as good or bad, and I think it's for a good reason. Like, you care, right? Like any brand would like die for anybody to like obsess over their rebrand, right? That means they've built something that people love and people care about, and that is the hardest thing to be able to do. I think quite often what you'll see is that if there's a disconnect between the story you're trying to tell and the feeling you're trying to convey, and then if the visual expression doesn't work in unison with that as a system, it kind of falls flat, right? And I'm not familiar enough with the Granola rebrand to give a lot of educated thoughts on it. I think I saw on Twitter, Ellis Hamburger, this guy I know, internet friends with, did the story, and I'm pretty sure one of the lines was "presence is power," right? Which I think kind of speaks to the anxiety feeling that you were talking about before. So I think that's always the goal with these things, right? I think if you're just trying to work on the visuals, or if you're just trying to work on the colors, or you're just trying to work on the logo, you're missing the bigger picture of, at the end of the day, what a brand is a promise, right? And then the visual side of the brand is an expression of that promise that has to work all together in a system for anybody to believe it, for anybody to care enough to be able to talk about it with the people in their lives. And I think I'm starting to see people slowly but surely start to understand that a little bit more, right? I think before, people thought of a brand as the last thing that you would do. We found product market fit. This is working. Now we need to look the part. But I think the way the world is going now, it's way more competitive. It's like, we need a story for people to care in the first place, or we're hitting a critical inflection point and we're trying to do something different. We need a story. We need a point of view. And then, of course, you need design to be able to express that in a way that makes sense and that people believe. Otherwise, again, like, the biggest competitor is indifference, right? Like, you can talk about your competitors all day, but if nobody cares about you to begin with.
So are you saying that the fact that I had even a negative reaction to the rebrand is almost like a symptom of a successful rebrand because it made me feel something?
No, I think what I'm saying is Granola has done a great job getting you to care in the first place.
For sure.
Right? And I don't know enough about their rebrand to go in detail in it, but what
Do you use the product?
I do not use the product. Okay. But what I can tell you is they probably had a bigger goal in mind, probably to reach a new type of customer beyond the Silicon Valley early adopter. They're probably trying to cross the chasm, and as a part of that, their design decisions were aimed more towards that, right? I think the other thing is like any big company who has a loyal set of users, nobody likes their rebrands. There's like, I don't know if you remember back in the day when Airbnb launched the Bello and their whole and like, it got crushed. Everybody hated that thing, right?
I love that logo now.
Yeah, now it's one of the most celebrated brands in marketing history, right? So I think that's the other thing that you sort of get used to after a while is people hate things at first, but eventually come around. And I think what Granola will do is either this will work, or they'll iterate, right? They'll realize something about their story isn't hitting, or maybe the story is wonderful and the visual expression needs some tweaking. Maybe the color needs a little bit of tweaking, right? And I think that's where, like, nothing is ever done, right? The world is moving so fast. You always have to be refreshing your story, your visual design. You don't necessarily want to be reinventing yourself completely every time. But we were talking about this before we recorded, right? It's like, I'm doing a pass at our website now, and I did it last year, and probably a year from now we'll do another pass, because I imagine the world a year from now is going to look way different than it does today.
So when you look at, I want to talk about kind of like how we both think about branding for our stuff, because I do think it kind of comes home. But just to finish the Granola thing, and then we'll move on. I know you don't use the product. The question I'm just, because I'm not a branding expert, so the question I ask myself is, if I was going to spend $1 million on a rebrand, do I want to do some like focus groups, or do I want to get reactions from people to see what they think, and what do I even ask them? Do I treat it like user research, like I do with product? And
Great question. Yeah.
Or do I try to like?
Let me answer this in two parts.
Yeah.
I think the first part of your question you didn't even need to ask. But should I spend $1 million on a rebrand? I think that's the wrong question to be able to ask. It's, how do I unlock my next stage of growth, right? Like, maybe that, like, design is the solution, right? So I think it's starting from a higher level of, like, what am I trying to do? Where am I trying to take the business in the next 12 to 18 months? What problem am I trying to solve? And maybe a rebrand is a part of that, right? And then it's like, okay, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to cross the chasm from early adopters to mainstream? Are we trying to create this new category? Are we trying to define this new era? And then the playbook comes to mind, and oftentimes maybe that will cost $500K or $1 million, right? But the ROI on that is like at least 10x that, right?
If it's the right solution to an important problem.
Yeah. And a team who's proven that they can do it before, right? Like, I think all of that stuff checks out. So now let's say, okay, a rebrand is the right move to be able to tackle all of these different things. I think it all starts with unpacking the team's point of view first, right? So it's different if you're just going to market and you're a team of 2 or 3 co-founders versus if you're, a bigger company and you have 1,000 employees or whatever it is, right? So I think it all starts with, to what you mentioned before, is what do we believe that nobody else believes? Why should anybody care about what we're doing? What do we understand about our customer that others don't? So I think step one is like really being able to articulate that belief. And I think the fun part of going through this process is you treat it almost like a design process. It's not like you interview some people, you play back what you heard, and it's like, here's your brand story moving forward. You explore different ways to be able to frame the problem, or maybe targeting different groups of customers, or dialing up or down certain benefits or differentiators, right? So I think that's one. 2, it's always important to be able to talk to not only existing customers, but potential customers. And you're not showing them things asking if they like them. You're not asking them what they want. It's more like an ethnography where you're trying to understand, like, what does their customer journey look like? Where are their pain points? And I think most importantly, what are their aspirations, right? Like, I think the best brands, especially in software, almost feel like lifestyle brands, right? And I think it's because they tap into this aspiration. So I think that's a helpful input to this process to be able to figure out what is that point of view. What I don't think you're doing is that I don't think you're taking that brand and showing it to potential customers, but I do think that there has to be alignment and conviction internally, and there has to be almost a map of, this is where we're going as a company, this is where we are today, and this is how this brand is going to help get us from A to B. And also, this is like part art, part science. Like, sometimes you can do all of these things, and you have to iterate to be able to get where that destination ultimately is.
That makes total sense. So just to make sure I'm hearing, do you think there's a world in which a rebrand can go live without ever having shown the final updated brand to like real customers to get their reactions? Like, does that happen?
I think it totally depends on the size of your company and, again, what you're trying to achieve with it, right? Like, I think it's always helpful to be able to pressure test as an input, but not as, I don't think it's like a product, and I don't think it's a usability test. I think you have to go in with a very specific set of things that you're wondering. So it's always important to be able to put things in front of people, but it's a very small input to the process versus, does this customer like this, or does it rub them the wrong way, therefore we won't do something
Got
like this.
it. Okay. And then I know I said that was the last thing about Granola, but I'm just realizing there's another question. Because when I was watching the unveiling, like the 2 co-founders sharing the story about the rebrand, the format was super interesting because the CEO was interviewing his co-founder, who I guess like runs the design side of things. The CEO is interviewing the design co-founder about the rebrand.
Sure.
Kind of like almost like this, and I was like, wow, the CEO clearly not driving this rebrand. Like this design co-founder was driving the rebrand. CEO, I'm sure, was involved and obviously like had to agree to a lot of stuff, but there was a real moment where the design co-founder ends up asking the CEO, how do you feel about the brand? And the CEO laughs and is like, well, brands like, or about the logo. It's like, logos are hard. And I picked up that, like, I don't know if the CEO is actually like in love with it, right? And so that, to me, like, if they're all drinking the Kool-Aid and they all love it and they're all like, they believe super strongly this is the right move, that's one thing if the outside world doesn't like it. But I kind of caught a little glimpse of like, I don't know if he likes it.
Yeah.
And that, so I'm curious to get your take. Like, that feels like if you're the CEO of a company and you're going to spend all this time and energy changing the way you present yourself to the world, shouldn't you like really believe in it and really love it?
1,000,000%. And I think that comes back to this idea that a brand is so much more than just the visual system. It's the expression of your promise and the story you're trying to tell. So if there's not total alignment and conviction around what that thing is, nobody else is going to believe you. If you don't believe it internally, nobody else is going to believe you externally. Like, I think for years we've been talking about in the marketing world how like brand is essentially a company's operating system, right? And I think the best brands, it's not that they have cool design. Like, yes, of course they have cool design, but the company is designed around their brand, right? They use their brand story and interview questions. They design their all hands around the brand story. Their office takes inspiration from what their story is and what makes them unique and what makes them different. So I think like that's when you know it really works, because otherwise it's like values that are in one ear and out the other. It's okay. It's like, how do you actually work? How do we want to show up in a way that's not for everyone, right? How do we want to put out ads into the world that like take a huge stance that say we're never going to put ads into our product? And I think those are the brands that people actually believe, because they're not saying yes to everything. They're saying no to a lot of things.
Yeah. So now, thanks for diving into Granola with me. That was, I kind of needed to get that out, I think. And this was kind of therapeutic for me as a user who felt certain things about it. I want to talk about yours. So off menu is your I guess a brand studio or brand design studio. How do you talk about it now? Is it?
Yeah, brand consultancy, design studio. It's one of those things where I'm always trying to figure out how I introduce myself at cocktail parties.
Your storytelling, yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before we started recording, I asked you how, because I've been, we've known each other 20 years maybe. I've seen you go through different phases of your journey, and then off menu has felt like for sure like the most Elan thing that I've seen you work on. And so as you think about evolving it, is that because Elan is changing? Like what causes you to want to update your off menu, the way you tell your story?
Yeah. So a framework that I really like to use that other brand strategists probably know like the back of their hand is called the 3 C's, right? And it's what is happening at the intersection of consumer behavior, the category, popular culture, and sometimes there's a 4th C, which is like your company, right? And I think informal, like not consciously, this is how I kind of think about it, right? Of like how are customers changing? How is the category evolving? And like where is the world heading to? So I think we've gone through several different iterations of being a storytelling studio to being now a full service design studio. That really starts with story. And I think the way the world is going is that what we were talking about before of brand being the operating system, that used to be kind of lip service a little, like that was the ultimate goal, but like it's hard to be able to get there. But now with AI, it seems like there's this opportunity that if you really know who you are and what makes you different and your unique and ownable point of view, like that is the input to AI to get much better results. I think a lot of people are struggling with slop and creating content and almost a frustration with AI. Like it can do a lot of things, but getting really high quality outputs is really difficult. I think what I'm starting to think about is how do you make the inputs much better to then be able to create much higher quality, more interesting, more opinionated storytelling coming out the other side.
Yeah, well, okay. We haven't actually talked about this, so we're breaking new ground. First of all, totally agree with the premise of people. There's like two narratives that are like, one is like AI is amazing and it's like the solution to everything, and then on the other hand, the slop narrative. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like we could leverage the power of AI thoughtfully right now, and a lot of people are thinking about this. I'm thinking about this with my writing. Sure. I think a lot of people are thinking about it with. I do think like writing and posts is like a big thing for slop, where people are like starting to kind of. I think a lot of people we're debating obviously how do you know what slop is versus how do you know what slop is, and everyone's got different bars for what slop means. I don't want to get sucked into that nitpicking, but I do think like everyone sees slop and everyone knows slop for themselves when they see it. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like something you believe about the world, is that AI can be harnessed with the right inputs.
Point of view is the antidote to slop.
Point of view, opinionated, and I got to come up with more words. But basically, a strong point of view is inherently not slop because AI cannot come up with strong points of view that properly map to what we actually think about the world. Like it's hard to is that line of thinking?
I think in marketing in general, let's put AI to the second or to the side for a second. It's we want to hear what you think, right? Like we care about people. We don't care about companies. We want to know what your perspective is based on your own lived experience. And I think AI can be really helpful in helping you articulate those things. But at the end of the day, those things come from you. And those are the things that are going to resonate, whether it's to share an idea internally at your company, whether that's to create a piece of content around that externally, whether it's to write a blog post or to be able to create a video.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please check out the links in the show notes to support the podcast. Mark and I do this out of love, but to keep it going, we also need your support. Thanks, and now back to the episode.
I think the number one complaint that you would hear talking to founder, or at least that I hear, is I'm kind of scared to invest all this time and money in a rebrand or a redesign, and then it's just going to sit in a deck somewhere. Like, am I just paying for a deck? And I think what I'm really excited by, and I've started building tools around these ideas, is what if it doesn't have to be just a deck that sits on the side? What if this is like the context window for you to be able to run your company
MCP.
on? Right. Like how do you actually build this living system that gives guardrails to everybody, that feels like this creative sandbox to be able to help them make their job easier so they can express their point of view more naturally, right? And are we there quite yet? I don't think so, but I think
that's where things are going.
That's in the next 6 to 12 months. That's where I think we're going. So the way I think about this is you need to go through this process to give yourself a foundation to be able to give people a reason to care, to be able to differentiate in oftentimes a very commoditized market. Or if you're building something new, you need to be able to help people understand why they should care about what you're doing and where it fits within their lives. That's step one. And then I think phase two is I think AI works for engineers, right? I think they've seen a 10x in their workflow and their output, but what about marketers? And that's what I'm curious to start digging into a little bit now is what is that Codex or Claude Code moment for marketers? And I think so much, you can only automate so much, but what you can't automate is a point of view. Mm-hmm. So how do I help people express who they are, why people should care, what makes them different, and how do we leverage that to be able to make their jobs 10 times easier?
Yeah, and I noticed one thing you're tinkering with that you sent me last night is I think you believe that you could build tools to kind of pull out of people how they feel or what they believe and get them to articulate these things in ways that they haven't before. And I'm curious, I gave you some feedback because I went through the exercise with Insider Loops and I was like, some of this is how are we, what do you believe? Some things what do you believe about the world? Or what do you want? What do people feel about you, right? And I was torn because I'm well, there's what I think they feel about me now, and then there's what I want them to feel about me.
Totally.
Talk about that a little.
Yeah, so I think it's always future facing. That was a really good piece of feedback. So to back up a second, part of what I'm experimenting with now, exactly to your point, is how do I ask a set of questions to folks to be able to, if they don't have the time or they don't have the budget, or if they're just even starting to get curious about how to articulate a point of view, how do I give them these tools to be able to help them do that? And then how do they leverage that with their team and with the AI to be able to start experimenting with this stuff? So one of the things that I'm thinking about that we're testing now that hopefully by the time this goes live will be out into the world is this personality test. And I've always been really interested in personality tests, right? Whether it's the Myers-Briggs or the Enneagram or BuzzFeed quizzes back in the day, because it's fun to get to learn about yourself, to be able to see yourself kind of through a different lens. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to be able to do one of these for brands, right? Where you essentially ask a set of questions and you get a brand archetype, and through that archetype you get a personality, you get a tone of voice, you have other brands that maybe, like swim within that universe. And could you then start training whatever AI that you're leveraging, whether it's Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, kind of around that brand personality to be able to make those outputs a little bit more ownable and better, like we talked about before. So that's the dream. And what we're doing now, we're early beta testing for exactly the kind of feedback like this, right? Where to me, it's obvious to answer this question. This is how you want to be in the future, right? You're shaping where you're going versus where you are right now. So feedback like that is absolutely hugely valuable to what we're doing.
But isn't there like a, I mean, I love that because I think it forces a level of aspirational. Just to be clear, I like that way of approaching it, and at the same time, I believe it's important to not have a large gap between the promise that you deliver to people vis-a-vis your aspirational positioning and whatever your hero says on the website, or whatever it makes them feel. And then what you can actually deliver downstream in the experience.
1,000,000%.
Yeah.
So part of it's hard to capture all of this in a tool, and this is the fun part of experimenting and figuring it out. With clients who I actually work with and take through this process, part of the final deliverable is a brand hierarchy, which is basically a system for how everything fits together. And really this whole pyramid, what's on top is the emotional promise. But an emotional promise has to be built on reasons to believe, right? And this is what you do as an organization or through your product to be able to deliver on this emotional promise, right? So I think those things have to be connected. I think there's this idea of earning attention and stealing attention. And I think the companies that steal attention, like it's like the person who runs onto the Super Bowl field naked, right? Like everybody's going to look at them, right? But is anybody going to remember them 3 days later? Like maybe, but probably not, right? Versus I think the companies that earn your attention, they do something that's unexpected, but it's still authentic to who they are, right? And I think that is the equation that most folks haven't wrapped their head around quite yet.
How to basically grab attention by being authentic, by earning it.
Absolutely, right? So like you go to the Off Menu website, right? We have all of these food-inspired collages of these two things that you would never think that would ever fit together, but they do, and they actually kind of make sense because you immediately get it, right? Whether it's a cauliflower sheep or whether it's a Saturn, but with an onion as the rings around the earth, right? And it relates back to our name, Off Menu, and wanting to be a different kind of consultancy, a different kind of design studio. Our operating system that I was talking to you about before is hospitality. I'm really inspired by the world of hospitality. Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table, is one of my favorite books of all time. Our operating principles are very much hospitality operating principles, right? And the biggest thing for me is like you have all of these different agencies who are out there who I think do really good work. Like good work, I think, is table stakes. It's like how do you make the experience of doing the work as good as the work itself, right? So like all of these things I think fit together in a way that hopefully feel true to my personality, that don't take itself too seriously, right? That when you see it, it's unexpected, but it kind of makes you laugh and it kind of makes you wonder. But I think it works because it's all intentional.
So as you look at your current website, I just want to kind of keep poking at or pulling the thread on like the need to update it and refresh it every year. Do you basically look at it and you're like, this no longer represents, you talk about the 3 C's, like the customer behavior, the category, and the third one was the
Popular culture.
Culture, right?
Yeah.
So is it like you look at your website and you're like, this feels old? Like I just don't feel like this is kind of where I'm at today or where we are today or where the market's at today. And therefore...
1,000,000%. So I think a year ago, and I think part of the impetus for like that redesign was helping people, like we were kind of creating this new category, right? We're not a traditional design studio. We do design, but so much of what makes our design good is the story. And like, what is the story and why is it important? And how do I help people who maybe aren't thinking about these things understand them. And that's kind of like, I don't know when this is going to air, but like the website that's up right now, is like, that's what it represents today. And I think now, a year later, I think a lot of people understand story. I think there's a lot more storytelling studios that are out there. I think the big thing that I'm trying to tell a story around now is how point of view is the antidote to slop, and how a point of view can help you differentiate, to be able to break through the noise, but also it can be this system to be able to train your AI better and be able to make AI work for marketing teams just as much as
engineering teams. It's a hard story to tell on a website.
Exactly, right? So I think like a lot of this is through experience of like talking to potential clients, talking to different founders, and you're not necessarily, creating this Venn diagram, like actually drawing it out always helps, but I think it's the world is changing, the category is changing, the customer is changing. So it's like, okay, how do we refresh our story to be able to meet this moment? And we're still like, our art direction isn't going to change, but the headline on our landing pages is evolving from be unignorable to be opinionated, like you mentioned. And we're leaning into a more opinionated typeface. As part of this launch, we're going to launch opinionated hats, right? So like that's part of the fun part about this is you have this point of view, and then the brand becomes this canvas to be able to express that point of view so people believe you, right? Anybody can say that they're opinionated, right? But how do I bake that into every single touch point of the off-menu experience?
I think first of all, I love I've always been a fan of opinionated design and product, and what that generally means to me, and I'm curious how much of this resonates with what you hope people think you mean by opinionated. But what it means to me is like the removal of options because you have conviction in one way that something should be done, it's about like, according to my taste, this is the right way to do this, or like this is how it should be done. And then obviously like as a company grows, maybe there's, they could be opinionated and they can create little like side pathways for companies that need specific things or for certain customers to customize things. But having like, I think of Linear as like a great example of a product that's opinionated versus like Jira counter positioning through opinionated, right?
Absolutely.
Like Jira is like infinitely configurable, and that's like the reason why certain people love it. And then Linear is like out of the box, just like you can go and you could change things, but we kind of like think you shouldn't because like this is like probably better, but you could if you needed to. I like that as an example of like opinionated versus not opinionated, but I'm curious if like what opinionated means to you beyond that.
Yeah, I think a couple things here. I think if you've ever seen Simon Sinek's Start With Why TED Talk, that's very famous. And if you're listening, you haven't watched it, you absolutely should, right? It still holds up over all of these years. And basically he draws these three concentric circles with the what in the middle, then the how, and then the why. And it's 99% of companies start with their function, right? What they do, how it works, and ultimately get to why it exists. And that the companies that you know and love that have these emotional connections that we've been talking about really start from the outside and work their way in. They start with the why and then kind of work their way into what they do. And I think that is being opinionated, right? I think being opinionated is like, why do we need to exist? I think leading with that. And I think like you're going to learn and your opinions are going to evolve over time, just like they do with anybody. But that why should stay consistent while the what and the how are always going to evolve depending on what you're trying to do in terms of growth, business goals, attracting new customers. Like the what and that how are constantly going to evolve. I think your former employer Meta is a really great example, right? They started as Facebook. Now they have a whole other name. They've tried a whole bunch of different things.
A name which is based on probably an area of investment that's no longer, like really.
Right, but like their why of connecting the world has always stayed consistent, right? And I think that's ultimately what you're trying to get to. And if you're in the early days of trying to figure out what this is, you can have an hypothesis towards your why. You can build around that. But I think it's like anything, it's strong opinions loosely held, right? And I think it's a good signal of whether you should start a company or not, depending on how much conviction you have around that why, right? How you implement that why is going to evolve as you learn things and you pivot and you iterate. But I think that's why you see such few companies start in one lane and go completely to a different lane eventually. I think oftentimes
because they don't have a strong enough why.
Right. Like you can iterate to another execution of your why and be successful. But I think of changing whys is really, really hard to be successful. It's not impossible, right? Like it can be done, but I think it's really challenging.
The why is kind of like an energy reservoir or something. It's like if it runs dry, like if you run out of the why, you're not really motivated even.
Yeah. Nobody's going to come wanting to work with you. Nobody's going to be knocking down your door for your product. Nobody's going to be recommending you to other people. So I think at the end of the day, what opinionated means, it's having a point of view and then being able to leverage that point of view to be able to unlock your next stage of growth. And it definitely means not saying yes to anything. I think my favorite client engagements where they've gotten the most value, the number one thing that they tell me is it's what we don't do, is like actually what we've learned. And we can say no to everything that is the distraction, and we can actually focus on this small niche best customer that's going to now expand our business in a really big way.
I mean, I think that narrowing in of positioning, I recently did a talk about fractional work. And one of my points that I think really resonated with people is something I observed at Continuum, where we had these like fractional executives looking to get more, advisory gigs or consulting gigs or interim gigs. And they'd be bringing, 20, 25 years of experience across a bunch of different like business models and domains and stages of company. And so they were very reluctant to like narrow in their positioning to being like, I do this, or like I'm the best person at this. So therefore, when we had people on the demand side, companies come and they wanted to like, hey, like I have this problem, who's like the best person for this on the platform? The generalists would never, they'd never be like the people we recommended, because they were like, they did a bunch of things. But the people that like narrow in on like one thing were the people that would always get matched. And so there's something counterintuitive about reducing optionality or reducing, I guess it would be more like, there's a benefit to cutting down your perceived area of strength or expertise so that the people who need that one thing were like, this is the thing for me.
Yes, and I think it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the emotional insight. If it applies to too many people, it's not interesting, right? Like you're looking for the holy shit insight, the thing that everybody's been feeling and experiencing but never said out loud. Like if that group is too big, it's not going to be a surprising insight. It's you're looking for a group of people who really feel that thing. So I think those two things are like really interconnected. Like this is why Super Bowl ads are so hard, right? And I think to your point before of leveraging an important moment that everybody's going to talk about, but actually speaking to still a very small targeted audience makes a ton of sense, because mainstream ads that are for everyone fall flat because they don't speak to anyone, because they don't have that emotional hook, that emotional connection. They don't engineer desire in anyone because they're too scared to be able to go narrow.
Yeah, no, totally. That makes total sense. So basically, there as you think about your storytelling and how you look at the audience of people that could potentially work with off menu, you want to have the kind of brand and emotional resonance that people will feel when they come to you that will turn down or turn off. See, like I'm kind of wondering, who are you ruling out? Like who's going to come to your website and be like, I thought I wanted to look at these guys for some branding help, but I don't know, this doesn't seem like my thing.
It's a really great question that I've thought a lot about. So, and I'm curious if this new iteration of the design is going to speak to that. I guess I'll let you and your audience be the judge of that, right? So I think anybody who's just looking for design is not a good fit for us. But I'll always speak to them because it's always through guided conversation. I think naturally people who are not designers feel they need design, or they're just like one designer away from being able to break out. But I love talking with folks to understand, like, what are they actually trying to do? And if they are just design away from doing that, I'll introduce them to a really great freelancer, a really great agency who specializes in what they try to do. But oftentimes they're trying to get at something bigger where they need storytelling help. They need to shape their point of view to be able to make sure that the whole thing kind of works in the right direction. So I will not just do a logo. I will not just do a visual refresh. It always has to be with story at the center before then going to design.
Yeah. So someone who basically looks at that and is like, I don't want to do all this story stuff first.
Yeah.
I just want to jump right into the design.
Yeah.
You want to basically tell those people, hey, like I might be able to route you to the people you need, but I'm not like the guy.
I also think folks who are trying to optimize, right? Like we have a really good thing going. We're just like looking for a small refresh. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's not the kind of work that I think we're best in the world at, right? I think what we're really good at is helping founders and execs see their business through a new lens and being able to develop a ton of momentum through like changing the trajectory of their company. So if you're on a really good trajectory and you just need a facelift, right? Maybe this is kind of similar to what we were talking about before. We're not the right partner. Where I think we're the perfect partner and where we want to be able to really hedge our bets are these big bets to be able to reach that next inflection point. If you are trying to break out in a really noisy category, if you're trying to create a new category, if you're trying to be able to raise your prices, these are all things that involve not only visual design, but really great storytelling. And if you can be opinionated, if you can do it in a way that really makes sense, where you feel it across the whole touch point, that's how I think these things are unlocked. And you avoid, in your case, the granola situation. Like that. That's why I think it's so important, because it's not just one thing. It's the whole system and how everything feels together.
Yeah, I guess time will tell whether, that rebrand is a major unlock for them, and whether, all the stuff that I don't see as a customer was in fact the thing that leads them to that. But no, I mean, I think what you're saying is making a lot of sense. Is like, you want to turn away incrementalists. You want to turn away people that just need a designer, which is kind of like offensive, right? When I think about someone, I just think about someone coming to you asking for you to just like do a logo for them or doing design. Like, knowing you, I feel like if I sent you someone that needed that would feel kind of like offensive.
It's not offensive necessarily, because I think a lot of people don't know or understand. Like, I like what we were talking about before, right? Like, part of why I love to write on the internet and share my point of view is because I feel like what I do, and a lot of people who I know who are really great who do similar things to me, it's so illegible, right? It's not part of the Silicon Valley fabric. It's not how tech companies are built or made. But this practice of leading with strategy and story applies in other industries where it works really well. And I think now technology is changing, and I think the way companies are getting built are evolving. And I think we're about to see the tech world operate a lot more like the CPG world, right? Where it's not necessarily the best product or technology wins, but it's the best story wins, And I forget where I was going with this, but essentially what I want to do is make this stuff more legible.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you definitely get me. Like, I think I'll be honest, like, thinking about branding and storytelling for the stuff that I'm really passionate about feels very high stakes. It feels scary. It feels like, I do believe that whenever someone expresses strong opinions, there's a chance that you'll change your mind too.
Sure.
So, when you feel a certain way and you're very strongly, when you're very publicly vocal about it, if you change your mind later, or if you no longer think something is true, then you're on the record, having thought that. And I don't personally mind. Like, I'd love to 6 months from now or 12 months from now feel like I love the new granola brand. Like, I would be the first one to raise my hand and say, like, I was wrong about that. But I do feel like there's an element of fear with being opinionated. And I wanted to tie this to like a piece of feedback you gave me on our website on Insider Loop. So like, you, by the way, super helpful feedback. I definitely made some changes based on that. One thing that was like, I'm still wrestling with is you mentioned something like, you guys should lean into like, positioning yourself as maybe like a cheat code for interviews or something like that. And I thought maybe we could spend a minute on that, because that's an example of something that, okay, so Insider Loop's like, we interview people that work at the companies that we put these guides for together. We also interview candidates and talk to candidates that are either successful or unsuccessful, look at publicly available information. We synthesize all that into these, the kind of like scouting reports. We call them guides, but they're really like scouting reports on like really what's the process, what can you expect, questions that get asked, et cetera. And I want us to maintain a high integrity bar as a brand, right? So I don't want us to ever be seen as like something that is like Cluely, like that A16Z company that was like all about like cheating for everyone. Like that feels almost like the opposite of the kind of like brand, because Mark and I just like really care about playing a long game and reputation, and we just want people to like. I would love if our brand was such that every company we do a guide for is either like honored that we do a guide for them because we see them as like a really top company, or even proactively thinks that our guides are so good that they would recommend them to people interviewing there because they're like, hey, like this is better than anything we could put together ourselves.
Yep.
But it's not a cheat code,
Yep.
right? So I wanted to just like get your thoughts on like how would you suggest that I think about that?
Yeah. I think when giving you that feedback, like that's what this felt like to me, right? But not in a you're cheating, breaking the rules kind of, but like you're kind of giving people this edge, right? Like I remember back in the day, and you know this better than anyone because I would always call and commiserate with you when I was interviewing at big tech companies for product roles. I always felt like I had really great experience and a really good philosophy, but was terrible at interviewing. Like the hypothetical questions, it would catch me off guard. And I would always make it to the end, but like never quite cross the line to be able to get over it, right? And if I would have had something like this would have been a cheat code to like prepare, right? Not to be able to cheat and break the rules, but it's basically helping me understand what is going to come. So then my best version of myself can shine. So I think this is where like language is really important. And to what we were talking about before, you need something authentic and genuine to you. Maybe I would call this a cheat code, but if that feels icky to you, I think scouting report is a really great way of being able to frame it. I think even that is more opinionated
but it's
than
also
a guide.
more functional than I'd like, right? It's not like aspirational. It's not spicy or opinionated. Like,
yeah, but
scouting report is almost like the most vanilla term you could think of.
I think it's a step in the right direction. And what's cool about a scouting report, not that you should necessarily go with it, but I think metaphors and analogies are really powerful because it takes something that's you don't necessarily understand and it makes it more relatable. So if you're a sports person, I think scouting report is really helpful. I don't necessarily know who your audience is and what they care about, but I think the high level thing that you're trying to help people, you're giving people an edge, but not in a I'm cheating kind of way, but in a like you can actually prepare for this and know what's coming so your best self can shine through on something like this.
Yeah, I would say like and Mark and I did a whole episode on this, so I don't think I'm kind of speaking out of turn, but like our why this exists is because there are people who know people at the company that they're interviewing at, so they can just like get coffee or talk to them and they can give them like the whole rundown, which is kind of what I used to help people with as a friend who were like applying to some of the companies where I've worked. And even when I would take like, dude, I would spend sometimes 3-4 hours like out of just to be a good friend, help someone get ready for like when I was at Meta, for example, telling them every single thing I could think of, like nothing that's like obviously violating confidentiality, but like, basically just like helping them as a coach get ready for interviews, and they still wouldn't pass, right? So the idea that, we could take some amount of information and put it into like one of these guides or these reports, and it would like, someone would like quote unquote cheat their way into a job just doesn't pass my like bullshit test. Like, I just don't think that's like how this stuff works. I don't, so like, I know that that's not like a true risk of like actually helping people like cheat. But the reason we wanted to build this is because we want to, like, not everyone has access to that friend at the company. And not every person, even if you have access to the friend at the company, not everyone's equally skilled at like explaining like how the whole thing works. And not every person has the whole picture. Like, if you like are the kind of person who interviews typically at the on-site round, but you don't ever do hiring manager screens or recruiter screens, obviously, because you're not a recruiter or maybe a hiring manager, you're not in a position to actually like help people. So like being able to take these different perspectives and just stitch them together into a single kind of resource that is going to give you, and then put our name on it as like, hey, like we put our name that this is like actually the process.
Yeah.
To us, that felt kind of like the unique contribution to the space. The guides are not like if people have read my guest posts on Lenny's newsletter or like have taken my Maven course, those are super deep dives into like product sense and analytical thinking interviews that get super deep into like my co-pilot is like implementing those, my templates. So I have gone like a mile deep on a couple interview types with some of my other stuff, but I'd consider these to be more like overviews of processes that allow you to then focus on what matters, but we're not going to actually like hold your hand every step of the way within a given step to go a mile deep.
Yeah.
And because that feels so reasonable to me, it's hard for me to find like the spicy opinionated angle in it because I'm so in it.
Yeah.
So how would you like, how do you navigate something that you're so like, it's just like the series of steps make so much sense in your head to something that someone from the outside can come to and they're like, I feel something about this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it comes back to the framework that we were talking about before, right? Is like, what is the human problem behind the business problem that you're solving?
So I think because we do these guides for top companies, like we just launched the OpenAI guide, Stripe, DoorDash, Figma, Uber. These are like, we have more coming soon, which I won't announce yet. But because I have years of people coming to me for coaching help and course help, I know which companies are the hot companies. Then Mark runs Supra, which is a product leader community. And people constantly come to him being like, hey, do you know anyone at these companies? So we're both stitching together what we're hearing and we like know what the hottest companies are. And so because people applying to the hottest companies feel like the stakes are really high, there's basically no one who's applying to OpenAI who'd be like, this is a horizontal move for me. I mean, maybe they're at Google or Anthropic and they're considering a horizontal move, but those are basically the top 3 hottest companies right now for PMs. But the vast majority of people who are coming to buy one of our guides would view landing that role as some kind of life-changing event, right? Like this is a compensation level up. This is a brand name on my logo, my resume level up, kind of like what I experienced when I went to Facebook. Like that was my first like major brand that I was really proud of. So I think there's like that career, like high stakes career moment for people that they will find us during that. They'll find one of my stuff these days. As far as like the underlying problem, they're not sure they're not sure where to spend their time.
Yeah.
Where should I spend my time? What should I know? What should I not worry about?
So I think like that's where we would start, right? I'm going for my dreams, this, life-changing moment, but I have lack of access and information for how to be able to go for it in a way that I'm used to, right? Like I'm smart, I find an edge, but like if I don't know somebody who works there, I don't necessarily have that, right? Now, let's think about like what is the unspoken human truth that helps us see the problem differently, right? What do you know about these people that other people don't? And we can just riff on this. Like,
I mean, I think my big, if I were to boil down the last couple of years to like a major insight that I feel like I have about just like interview prep and interview coaching in general that I don't see other people talk about as much, is it's working backwards from the rubric. Anyone who's ever worked at a company and interviewed people knows that when you're done interviewing people, there's like Greenhouse or like one of these ATS tools. Some companies are big enough to have their own in-house tools. And you need to literally score candidates on like very specific dimensions leading up to some kind of debrief where like the packet gets reviewed and they make a decision to move forward or not. And so theoretically, anything that you do in an interview as a candidate that is not designed to give the interviewer a very specific strong signal or set of signals on the things that they actually need to put in the system to pass you to the next round, you shouldn't do anything else. Like that's literally all you should do. So trying to understand what are they actually evaluating me on? What's thing that's underneath the question, right? Is the most important thing. And so we're trying to codify that for people to basically be like, look, like we're not going to tell you how to give them. I mean, we'll tell you some ways some successful candidates have approached it, but we do not provide, for example, like sample full-blown responses on like how to answer a question. That's something we've decided. That's like outside the scope of the guides. We don't want you to memorize something, and then if they ask you about something different, then you're not prepared to answer it. So I think like what we believe is like, I call it like rubric-based coaching. And I think that I don't see a lot of other people do this. If you read a lot of other books, they kind of start the other way around. They start with like the framework, and the framework is kind of like meant to be like generalized enough that you could apply it to like a bunch of different questions. But I kind of like to start it the other way. Like if you're going to interview at OpenAI, you should be spending all your time trying to understand what are the OpenAI interviewers actually grading me on, and then don't spend your time on anything unrelated to that.
Yeah. So basically what I'm hearing in terms of, and like, this is part of the fun part of the exercise where you don't just do this once. It's not like you just like fill out a template and then you go on with your day. You spend a whole lot of time going wide with all the different ways until you feel conviction over something that works. But just as we're riffing here, it's like, okay, you're going into this life-changing moment and there's no roadmap, you know? And like, how does that feel, right? That probably brings up a lot of anxiety. You don't, like, you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't plan for something like a job interview, that probably makes you feel a specific kind of way, right? But what you bring them is you don't bring them answers, but you tell them the things that matter, and you tell them the things that they're looking for so that they can prepare for this in a way that they can achieve what they're going for. So I think the things I would pay attention to is that feeling of what people feel without this thing to once they use your guides, like what is that from to?
Yeah, and I tried to, probably doing a terrible job at this, but like on the hero, I've kind of like tried to do counter positioning by having like the word guesswork and then like scribbled out with like verified intel. That's kind of like one attempt at it, which is like, you know, deeply, rigorously researched and, you know, like company specific PM interview insights. But yeah, I think it's like the thing I want to get them away from is like guesswork or feeling lost or feeling uncertain in how to spend their time. Well, like unfocused, I guess.
And I'm just basing this off of knowing you and having so many conversations with you as you were interviewing over the years at places. Like when I take a look at what you're doing and I see your fingerprints all over this, it's you should be judged on what you're capable of doing, and interviews are not necessarily the best way at getting at that, right? So can you give somebody what they need so they can put their best self forward so they don't have to feel what you felt when you struggled with this for a long time? You made it through, you cracked it, and you wanted to bring that to everybody else who doesn't have a friend who works at that company.
Which to me is like the hallmark of great coaching and great, you know, like when I help people with coaching, and I told you I started working with a personal trainer, like personal trainer is not doing my sets for me. They're not doing my reps for me. They're not lifting shit for me, right? Like I have to do all that myself. But they are showing me the form. They're showing me the motions. They're helping me pace myself, telling me when to breathe, right? Like they're giving me all of the things that allow me to focus on, you know, arguably the hardest part, which is like literally like doing the workout. And so I think of a lot of my interview coaching and a lot of my materials and my co-pilot and like the course and like these guides are all part of the same body of knowledge, which is, interviews are hard. They're very emotionally intensive. Like you have so much on the line and the other person has basically nothing on the line, because especially in this market where you just like, it's like shooting fish in a barrel on the company side, so many qualified candidates, and then you as an employee are like, there's only one OpenAI or there's only like one Anthropic or whatever, right? So you're trying, it's such a mismatch of it's such an unfair game in some way that to me there's something very meaningful about helping people show up at their best. It's not to say that their best is going to be the right fit for the role, but at least you'll know some of my favorite emails I've received from people are not after they land offers. It's after they I'm getting a little like choked up on it because it's like they made it further than they thought was possible for them.
Yeah, take your best shot, right? Like that's all anybody wants is they want their opportunity to be able to go for it. And I think that's what you guys are helping them do is you're helping them go for it. You're not helping them cheat the system, but like the system is hard to break through. It was kind of designed that way. Like in a perfect world, I think whoever worked at these companies would be giving their candidates the same info that you would so they could have an honest conversation about like, are they the best person for the job? So I think that feeling is captured in there somehow, and it takes a lot of writing, it takes a lot of iteration, it takes a lot of putting things out there and seeing what hits to be able to get to that perfect language. But I think like that is the path of you being able to figure out, and what you're doing is you're crystallizing your opinion, right? Like that's what you're doing. It's like, why is what I'm doing, why does that matter, right? Why do I get excited by this? The people who come to me and they email me thanking me, what are they thanking me for? And it's through this extra, it's not, everybody thinks of brands as this, like you work on it 6 months and then you launch. And it's not that way. It operates very lean. You're constantly evolving your opinion, and you finally get to a place once you have conviction to be able to put it out there in a meaningful way, and you're hitting on it in everything you do. So that's how people end up believing it. If your point of view is just in your Twitter bio, or if it's just on your website, nobody's going to remember it, right? But if they can feel it in every single interaction, which I'm sure they do with you in your Maven course, on your Substack and your podcast, that's how, this is Ben. This is what he believes. This is what he stands for. And they know you, and like that is your promise, right? Like the way your website looks is just an expression of that promise, right? Which like brings me back to this idea that I think a lot of people, they hire a design studio for a marketing problem, right? And like design is so probably more important than it ever has been before, but I think it's always in service of a marketing problem or a product problem, right? And design is how these things end up getting solved. And I think some of the best marketing and product leaders are themselves designers, but I think it's this big misunderstanding of what you need. You don't necessarily need a visual makeover, but what you need is you need to evolve your promise for a very specific kind of person with that emotional hook. And once all of that stuff comes together, and if it's expressed the right way visually, like then you're in business, and then you're working with something really interesting.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for helping me articulate some of this stuff for myself, because I think I know a lot of it, but I think it's hard to kind of take those things that you just kind of like, to some degree, all of us, I think, view our own story as somewhat unspecial or unremarkable or totally ignorable in another way. But then when you talk to people, when your story comes into contact with people outside of the story, the way that like each of those conversations is almost like a data point that comes back to you about how is the story actually coming through. So hearing your reaction to the story as someone who's kind of been very closely in the loop for a while is super helpful. And then at the same time, I'm kind of like, I'm sure the way you feel, and I'm sure the way a lot of people feel when working on their own marketing assets, like on their own websites, I want the story to resonate with someone who, I don't necessarily want to assume that they know all of the things about my podcast and the course. And like, if someone just landed here, right, could they feel something? Could they feel this is an opinionated place that's trying to help me show up my best for interviews? Or is this a place that's trying to give me the answers to the test? Like trying to like really make sure that that emotional resonance is there.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like, it's a big task. It's like never done, to your
I'm
point.
sure a bunch of people are helping people with interviews, formally or informally, right? But like at the end of the day, people want Ben's special sauce, right? Like you've had so many experiences. You have a way of thinking about this and approaching this. You really care about this, right? And like that all has to come through as part of the brand. Like the brand sits on top of marketing and product, right? It's like at the end of the day, it's one customer journey. And I think some people forget that, especially the way a lot of these companies are set up with marketing here and product here. And sometimes design has its own team over there, right? But at the end of the day, it's just one thing. And I think even long before you start your company, you're building your brand, right? Like you're figuring out what you care about. You're figuring out how you want to make other people feel. And it's the fun part about this is when you get started or when you're ready for a new chapter, it's the culmination of all of these things to be able to put out into the world and hopefully inspire some people to be able to come along for the journey. Like my favorite question is, if we were to champion a movement that was bigger than selling our product, what movement would we want to champion and why?
That's a big question.
Yeah, and I'm sure you probably have some answers to that based on all of your different experiences. And I think that's kind of how we break out of the product marketing. Everybody does this. It's so functional to, can we build something that other people believe in, who would want to champion and talk about it when we're not in the room? And that's really hard to be able to get towards, but I think it's what everybody should be shooting for. And if you can do that, it's pretty special.
Yeah. No, I don't think I've ever articulated this out loud before, but I think when I think about what the most, and then let's start wrapping up. But when I think about the most exciting vision of, I think, the future that we could get to with what we're trying to do is like, every company can, I think, equip every candidate for roles with information that feels genuinely helpful and allows people, just improves the overall, I think, experience of job searching sucks. Job searching sucks. No one likes it. No one likes interviewing. And I think if there was a way to to make an impact by making that process feel better for both sides, for companies and for candidates, again, functional. It's very functional. But when I have an emotional reaction to that idea because I think you know this, but when I landed my job at Facebook, that was maybe 20 companies that I talked to over the course of 3 or 4 months. And this is early 2020 as COVID's happening, big layoff at Abstract. Find myself in the job market, not a lot of runway, never had a big, high paying job before, digging into savings. And just my confidence, every single rejection that I'm getting is lower and lower and lower. And just being, and I never thought about getting coaching, never thought about looking for help because I didn't trust any resources. So I just want less people to feel like that. I think that life is hard enough to so anyways.
And as your friend and seeing what you've helped me with and other people, you genuinely love helping people shine. Right. And when I think of what you're doing, that's ultimately what you're doing is the people that you work with are really good at what they do and they're really interesting, but they just don't know how the game is played and they're looking for information so they can make sure they shine in a way that kind of lines up with what the company is looking for. And without that, they're flying blind, but they're giving themselves a chance to win by being themselves, by the way, but telling their story in a way that's going to resonate at these particular companies. And I think there's something to be said about that. That's incredible. It's the famous old adage of teach a man to fish, right? That's what you're doing is you're not telling somebody's story for them, but you're helping them shine in a way that's going to be able to get them noticed. And I think there's something really cool and there's an emotional feeling that's baked into that.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Cool. We can keep talking about this for a long time, but I think let's start wrapping up. So I have 2 quick questions and we'll do our special gratitude corner.
Great. Okay.
So the first quick question is, if people who are listening to this want to learn more about what you're thinking about or they want to go deeper with the kind of stuff that you're thinking about these days, where would you direct them?
Yeah. So our website is off-menu.com. So you can learn a little bit more about the studio and our philosophy over there. I've been writing quite a bit, maybe on a weekly basis at offmenu.substack.com. There is no dash in that one, which I know is a little bit confusing. But I write about all sorts of basically just experiences that I'm seeing in my practice and talking about them to be able to reach more people and experiments in building AI. So I think those 2 places. And if you're on X at my first and last name, Elan Miller, feel free to reach me on there.
Yeah, I've been following your writing for a long time, and I have to say I think you really tapped into something recently with the Substack. Every time you send a new newsletter, I star it to make sure I have time to sit with it. It's kind of a fun thing for me.
Oh, thanks, man.
So please, whatever the process is that you've been doing, keep doing it because I think it's been yielding some really good stuff. Do you actually have anything you want to say about that? Have you changed anything that you learned about what got you to really dial in and like over the last year that you'd share?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is I'm having fun with it. Like it doesn't feel like homework. It doesn't feel like a chore. I really geek out on these things, and it's fun to think about. And I see something in my practice, or I see something that's happening in popular culture, or I'm seeing something that's happening in AI, and I write about it to better understand it for myself and be able to articulate it, and then to be able to share it. Like, I don't have a huge following. I have around maybe 1,000 subscribers, but the best part is getting all sorts of texts or replies back of people thinking about or working through the same things. So I've just found it to be a lot of fun. And I think when things are fun, like nobody can compete with you. So that's kind of been the secret there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Cool. And then the second quick question is, how can the audience be helpful to you?
I think it's more of how can I be helpful to you? I'm always launching new experiments. If you are a founder, or another founder or another early head of marketing or design who feels like they could go through a process like we talked about to be able to find that emotional insight, to be able to tell that story, and then to be able to express that through design, of course, I'd love to chat. But honestly, just like engaging with me online, I have so much fun with the back and forth with conversation. So you tell me how I can help you.
Cool. I love that. Amazing. Okay. And let's wrap up with our very special gratitude corner. So, basically, I've known you for a very long time. You've had all kinds of zigzaggy turns, just like I have in your career, and that got you to where you are today, which feels very you and very authentic. I just want to make some space at the end of the conversation, because one of our themes for the year is just like being more leaning into gratitude, and I think it's a great way to just like life rewards that. Is there anyone that you would like to thank? It could be multiple people if you want, on the role that they've played in your journey to kind of get you to this point.
Yeah, what a question. I feel like I could talk about this for half an hour. I've been really lucky, and a lot of people have been super, super helpful to me. I think unexpectedly, like my parents. Like I don't think about this a lot, but both of them are entrepreneurs. They gave me a foundation to be able to go for my dreams, and I think if I didn't have that, like none of this would be possible. So definitely them. And then I think just like anybody who's ever taken a bet on me. I think, like we talked about before, what I do is really illegible. It's not as easily understood as I need, design help, or I need engineering help. So whether it's former mentors at old jobs, or people who have literally invested in me, or good friends like yourself, where we can sit and have coffee and kind of talk through all these things, I'm just really grateful for people who have given me a shot.
I love that. Shout out to your parents. And great siblings.
Yes, great siblings too.
You guys have a whole clan. There's a lot of Millers.
It's true.
All right, man. I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, this was great.
And, thanks again to 28th and Park for hosting us. Beautiful studio.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully the first of many podcast recordings in this room, but you get to be the first.
Thank you. It was an honor.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.